So I'd like to introduce Councilmember Raji. He will be handling the question part of this segment. And I welcome him to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to the candidates for being here tonight. It is very difficult to run for office, especially at the county level. You've sacrificed your time, your efforts, time away from your family, so you could be here and serve the community. We're very appreciative of that. These questions are written by Vienna Votes. I'm here to read them, and hopefully I won't flub it. There's a little bit of background information before each question that I know that you all know, but it's good to repeat for the audience so they understand what we're talking about. If I need to repeat the question, I'll just repeat the question portion. And I'll make one editorial comment before starting, since I have the mic and nobody can steal it. The town of Vienna is looking for a partnership with the county. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, first question. Some background information. Fairfax County's website defines the duties of the Board of Supervisors as, quote, establishing county government policy, passing resolutions and ordinances, approving the budget, setting local tax rates, and approving land use plans and making appointments to various positions, end quote. In the town of Vienna, our town council does several of these tasks, such as setting our own budget and tax rates. We also have our own Department of Planning and Zoning. So here is the question. Given the unique situation created with overlapping government, overlapping local government, could you briefly describe what you see to be the role of the Hunter Mill District Supervisor in the town of Vienna? And how do you envision engaging with Vienna residents if elected? Starting with Ms. Dodd.
Thank you. And it's a good question because, like many of the other candidates here, I was greeting voters as they voted on Tuesday for the town council elections. And some people were actually a little surprised that there's another election coming up so soon and did not understand that they were also part of Hunter Mill District, because maybe we have been somewhat invisible or not as visible as we should have been to the Vienna residents. So, of course, the Hunter Mill Supervisor is your representation at the county level. And while land use decisions within the town boundaries are made by the town council, you all are affected also by land use decisions made outside of your boundaries. And so you come to your supervisors when you have concerns about that. And we are also deeply involved with the schools, which make up more than half of the county budget. Now, of course, there is a school board that is in charge of most of the school policies, but the Board of Supervisors holds the purse strings and has power to make sure the school board is focusing properly on some issues. And I know that I will be pushing hard to accelerate the capital improvement plan so that we can get out of trailer classrooms in less than the projected 10 years. Because we know there are even trailer classrooms in Vienna, the only trailers allowed in Vienna, and that's not optimal for our students, so we need to do better. And I've been deeply involved in the school system, helping needy students get their individualized education plans, their IEPs for special education, and so I'm ready to step in and make sure that our education system is where it needs to be. The county is also responsible for human services, so that's child protective services, family preservation, a whole gamut of health services as well. And as a child advocate attorney, that has been where most of my professional time has been spent. So I know how to ensure that those needs are also being well met. And we govern the Community Service Board that provides mental health services throughout the county. And I know that the Fairfax County CSB is so tight on its funding that there are people who are in great need of assistance, and yet it's not urgent enough for them to be provided the services through the CSB. We're also important for public safety. And I know that, as I was saying, the land use issues affect Vienna as well. I was talking with a police officer recently who tells me that in his squad of 11, only 2 of those officers are able to live in the county because there's no affordable housing. So land use affects public safety, and the county deeply affects the town of Vienna. Thanks.
Hi. So 2 words, collaborative and supportive. And that should be the relationship between the supervisor and the town of Vienna in terms of how we work together. We should be supportive of what the town council and the community want to do here in Vienna, and work collaboratively to make sure that there's seamlessness between what happens at the county level and what happens at the town level, where those areas meet, whether it's in education, whether it's in services that are offered in our community, whether it's on the traffic and how it flows through and how it comes through the town of Vienna. So all of these areas, are collaborative and supportive are really, really important. And that means that we need to listen at the supervisor's level to what's going on and communicate regularly with the town council, the mayor, and the community. And I think that that's critical and important in terms of how we do things. Schools are extraordinarily important. It is, our education system is really great, but there are things that we could do better, and we need to work on that. We have a wonderful opportunity coming up this year with a new school board coming in. And one of the things that I'm really good at is building those collaborative relationships, developing relationships with everybody on the school board so that we can have good voices and we can make sure that between the Board of Supervisors and the school board, we work together to make sure we're doing the best for our children and our community. So those are some important areas where we need to work together. And the other issue, and at the very end of my opening statement, I mentioned it, climate change is an overarching issue. And it's something where there are no borders and there is no divide. So if we're going to address issues of climate change in our county, we need to address it in our 100 Mill district, in our communities locally, in our houses, and then expand that vision outwards. We know that what happens here in the 100 Mill district doesn't necessarily just stay right here. Those issues affect other districts as well, and what other districts are doing and other counties are doing affect us. And we need to be cognizant and aware of that if we are really going to address some of these larger issues. So again, collaborative and supportive. I want to make sure that we are a good partner as we work together.
Thanks, Jamie and Pasha. Thank you for the question. And thank you for your editorial comment about partnership. I think that is key to everything we do. One of the roles that is not laid out on the county website where it describes the supervisor's responsibilities is constituent services. And I think that gets to the heart of the way to provide the best representation possible for Vienna. I think that regular office hours in the town would be very important, hear what the citizens have to say. The ability to engage, to chat, to hear what is on the minds of the residents allows us to better look for opportunities to serve the town. I think that being an eagle eye for things that could benefit the town, whether it's transportation dollars, hearing your needs for sidewalks and bicycle connections, hearing where the park authority is working with you or not, understanding where your citizens would like to play a role in our government. Each supervisor makes about 70 appointments to commissions and councils and organizations. So how would Vienna like to participate with us? Continuing to fully fund our schools is the job of the supervisor. The school board is responsible for dictating policy. But being aware of issues that are concerning the town. I think being here, being present, and being able to listen to what's on your mind is very important. I've had the opportunity to work closely with the town of Herndon in my day job, and it was fascinating to watch Supervisor Faust working with a new fund that became available to provide extra money to the Herndon Arts Center. Those are the types of things. Be on the lookout for things that can support the town of Vienna. Thank you.
So with Vienna being a town in the format that it is, it's a unique relationship in the sense that in a traditional local government, all this would be taken care of by one government. Since it's split up this way, it definitely needs to be an open dialogue between the supervisor, the mayor's office, and the rest of the town council. Particularly in the same way that an individual supervisor would be working with the other supervisors and the chair to show issues that would only be affecting one district and make that known to the rest of the board of supervisors, to the whole county, since we all vote on issues that don't just affect Hunter Mill. I view that same type of relationship being important with the supervisor's role here and that of the town council. Obviously, the Hunter Mill supervisor needs to be very involved with Vienna, but they're never going to be as involved as the town council is, obviously. So the town council and the mayor, plus there's many more of them, have a very large ear to the ground on issues relating to Vienna. And I think that role needs to be going back and forth. Both sides need to be making sure that we're doing what the people need and the people want. So if on the supervisor side, if James Madison High School or the various elementary schools here in Vienna are not having their needs properly met, I would encourage that not only the citizenry, but the mayor's office and the rest of the town council be calling the Hunter Mill supervisor's office and being like, why isn't more funding coming to our schools? What's going on here? Are we being left out? So I think a partnership is definitely the ideal situation. And when and if an issue that one side is responsible for isn't being properly addressed, I think there definitely needs to be a large amount of pressure put that way. And I think that needs to be a two-way street to make sure that the people of Vienna are getting all of the issues taken care of, and that all of us are making sure that we're holding each other responsible. So the various issues that affect the people of Vienna, such as development, such as our schools, aren't getting left in the dust, and we don't have to wait for a new election in order to make change if something's going wrong. But we just had the big town council race, and we're having this race right now. I think the voters at both Vienna and Reston are going to get it right. So I'm looking forward towards July. I think it's when the new town council gets sworn in, and we get sworn in a few months later, obviously. Our general election's in November, but hopefully in 2020 there will be a very large partnership, and we will do good things for Vienna.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the microphone, but thank you for the question too. I think there are a couple of levels that are worth noting in terms of the role of the supervisor. Certainly on a personal level, I think it's very important, and I would agree with what several of my colleagues here said. There has to be a personal commitment of whoever the supervisor is to working with the town leadership in particular. There is a tradition in government of board-to-board cooperation, staff to staff. It's also worth noting. I think at a staff level, it's very important to make sure that the county staff are working with Vienna staff to tackle problems of common interest. I also think in the question, it's also worth noting and remembering what the primary responsibilities are of the Board of Supervisors. And it's mostly budget and land use. And land use doesn't really apply in the town of Vienna. I respect the town's authority to do land use. That's something I think sometimes the government that is closest to the people do the best job and is the most responsive. That is a challenge we have in Fairfax County, because most of Fairfax County does not live in a town. Most people do not have people that are neighbors and that they know on a personal basis. You have that advantage here in the town, and I think that is a tradition that, frankly, I would not want to see disrupted by anything that the Hunter Mill supervisor does. Beyond that, constituent service was also noted. That I completely agree. I think my experience as my first job out of college was actually in the Providence District Supervisor's office when Kate Hanley was the district supervisor. And I know how important it is to do good constituent service and to be responsive. And I think that's something that the Hunter Mill Supervisor's Office can also do for town residents. And remember, it's schools, fire and rescue, libraries, human services, different technical things, and then, as needed. And I would also mention bus service is something else that is county or metro. So Anyway, we'll get into more details on some of these. Look forward to that.
Thank you. Right on time. Moving to question number 2. Development applications are moving forward in Tysons in response to their comprehensive plan amendments. Notably absent from early proffers is a significant lack of diamond playing fields and other rectangular fields. As Tysons is built out, the cost of land for these recreational amenities will increase and places strain on Vienna parks and recreation resources. The question is, although Tysons is in the Providence District, do you have an approach for early acquisition of park and field development proffers? And do you have a plan to support Town of Vienna facilities in the interim? Starting with Ms. Howe.
Thank you for the question. Parks and open spaces are very important to communities. As you build up communities, we really need to make sure that we have those recreation facilities available for our children and our community overall. So in terms of how we would approach acquiring and working on parks, there's only, as you know, so much land available. Tysons is in Providence District. I would try to work with Providence in ways that we could work to see what is available there in terms of their development and where they plan to have their parks and services located. I realize there's going to be an inflow down here. We also have a capacity to perhaps work with the Drainsville District to see if we can also create some park services there so that we can expand facilities. Hunter Mill District also has some parks out in Reston area that we need to look at. And there's been a great deal of discussion in Reston in terms of what we're doing in terms of ball fields. One thing I will say in terms of ball fields and parks and diamonds is that we do need to look at the demographics of the community and what services are really best to implement and make sure that we are indeed meeting the needs of the community that is there. So that's really critical in terms of what's going on. And my comment on this is that out in Loudon, they made allowances for a whole lot of baseball diamonds and then realized what they really needed were some cricket pitches because that's what people demanded. So we just need to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community as we look at developing and maintaining our parks. I'm a strong supporter of open space and making sure that we have parks and recreation facilities, and we'll support those.
Thank you for the question. I think that the one perhaps best able to answer is Walter with his plan and 26,000 apartments approved and not yet built, and a 600-foot tower that's under consideration for location right here at Spring Hill. But that said, I think that we would need to look at a fair share distribution, making sure that Vienna parks weren't overrun, and doing calculation and providing compensation for use, perhaps. We know that there is vocalized demand. We'll have the schools and the park authority look at the distribution and see how it's shaping up.
So this gets into a larger issue of how Providence, and particularly how Tysons, affects the town of Vienna. In my view, it should actually create a very traditionally negative relationship between Providence and Hunter Mill, because Providence wants to grow, particularly in Tysons, and Vienna does not want the outflow of all that additional traffic into the town. What we've seen is between the chair and both our supervisor and the Providence supervisors, because they've all been very pro-development supervisors, we've seen actually a very large friendly relationship between them that hasn't really been focused on making sure that the pressures from Tysons are done in a way that doesn't overly burden Vienna. All three of those supervisors are retiring this year. Providence, like us, has 5 candidates. The at-large district has 4. Whoever wins in Providence will probably be another very pro-development supervisor. That said, they could still, there will be room for a new relationship that could make it so Tysons development allows us to have two things, more baseball fields and diamond parks and things along those lines, as well as it's designed in a way that doesn't put as much burden, particularly traffic-wise, on the town of Vienna. But that's a very intentional decision that is going to have to happen, and that's going to require a very good, healthy relationship with the new Providence supervisor, as well as the chair of the board. If elected, that's something I'm going to work on very quickly, very early on, to make sure that this very large issue of the traffic outflow of Tysons does not continue to get worse. And I encourage everybody to look heavily into the chair race, because I know certain candidates for chair are more concerned with this issue than others.
All right, thank you for the Tysons plan question. First of all, let me just point out, actually about 10% of Tysons Corner is in the Hunter Mill district. Okay, it's not all in Providence. So everything on this side of Route 7 that's between 123 and the toll road is Hunter Mill district. Second, in the Tysons plan, there is a commitment for 20 full-size ball fields over the life of the comprehensive plan. That's a 40-year plan. To date, there are, last I heard, 8.5 ball fields that have been proffered, that have been committed to. And sometimes you get a half a ball field because you don't have a development that's big enough to get a full ball field, and they have to be combined with their neighbors when the neighbors come in. Almost all of those to date, I believe except one, have been rectangular fields. And the reason for that is what Shamley was talking about, which is the demand. We're seeing now much more demand for sports that are played on rectangular fields than we are in diamond fields. And I say that and it pains me a little bit because my son was a big baseball player. And, you know, so I've spent time in ball fields all over this part of the county. But that's just the way things are going. The other thing that I'd point out is there were 20 ball fields that were required as part of the Tysons plan. When that started to be implemented by Linda Smith, and I would not say Linda Smith is a particular pro-development supervisor, but when that started to be implemented, the developers screamed and hollered. I didn't hear from Maggie's employer, but I heard from other developers that this was way too onerous. But the county stood firm and said, no, this is what's in the comprehensive plan. We need these commitments. The one thing I would say that we have to really think hard about, these fields, they're fields, they're parks, but they're not publicly owned. These are all being in Tysons Corner. It's something we really need to think about for the long term. Should we be getting public parks, public dedication, instead of just having basically the developer, the landowner, continue to own the parks and provide park services? That's a longer term issue we should really be thinking about.
So it is true that the Tysons plan calls for 20 athletic fields, and that we're far from that goal. 8.5, there were no athletic fields built under this Tysons plan until 2015. But the problem is that even that plan is far from sufficient. If you look at the population projections for the Tysons area, that would call for 60 athletic fields. So agreeing to a Tysons plan that accounts for 20 fields is already not meeting the needs of the residents who need them. And beyond that, there were not steps taken for early acquisition of land for those fields. And so we are already way behind. Now, we have had good news recently that there was a hotel planned to be built on Boone Boulevard, and that's not going to be built, and that land will be freed up to be an athletic field. So thank goodness for that. But the way the Tysons plan has been done has not met the demonstrated needs of its residents or its projected residents. And so that's the way business as usual has been conducted. And that's why we need a change. And I understand that developers don't want to give up square footage to an athletic field when they could be earning more profits from that piece of land. But that's what we as county representatives of all of you out here have to demand, that we have to meet the needs of our citizens. So whether they are rectangular fields or diamond fields, I agree, needs have to be carefully assessed so that that division is made properly, but the inadequacy of the fields is a genuine concern. Thank you.
Question number 3. Fairfax County and the town of Vienna are working collaboratively toward a joint development to renovate or replace the Patrick Henry Library, which was built in 1971, and create additional public parking to support economic development in the town. A $91 million bond referendum is slated to occur in 2020 for 5 library sites. But that is only one step towards completion. Here's the question. Please share your thoughts on what you feel is needed for Vienna at the library site. Do you consider renovations or rebuild a priority? And if so, what do you plan to do to help move this process ahead expeditiously? Starting with Ms. Parker.
Thank you. The library is such a critical piece of the heartbeat of a town. I think the first thing that I would need to do would be to evaluate the current, backing up. What we need is a plan. I'm delighted with the bond referendum. I'm delighted with money that the town has vigorously sought from transportation funding in the region. I think a parking garage would be, if positioned properly, would be of great benefit to the town. I would need to see a study to find out whether or not, I guess, the impact of a renovation. Is it feasible at 50 years life of a building? You know, how well was it constructed? What kind of systems were put in? Are the systems able to be retrofitted to be green and friendly? I just think I would need to know a little bit more than what I've been able to read so far about whether renovation or new construction would be most efficient in the long term.
So the Patrick Henry Library is certainly a major issue that I will definitely be focused on if elected. In terms of whether or not to renovate it or rebuild it, that's something that I would want to listen to the town council and the people directly. I personally don't have a preference. My only preference is simply that the majority of the people's wishes on which one of those 2 options is seen. If the choice of those 2 is to build a new library as a replacement, I would be very much an advocate for making sure that the existing library exists and is maintained and is operated during the construction of the new one. We have a similar issue in Reston with our own library, as well as a shelter there, and other issues similarly of this idea of, do we tear it down in the meantime? Because obviously operating an existing library while holding land for another is a bit more of a trickier issue. But that is something that I think needs to be a major priority. The town of Vienna should not be without their library during a period of construction. And also there's concerns, for example, with the Reston Library about lost volumes of books in that transitionary process. I don't want anything along those lines to happen in Reston or in Vienna. So ultimately with the library, I want the will of the people in terms of which path to be seen out at the end of the day. But regardless of which path, I would advocate for my other supervisors on the board to make sure that they urge their citizens in their districts to vote on it when the bond referendum comes up. And I would be advocating for it very strongly.
Thank you for the question. This is a project that's in the capital improvement program that was approved by the Board of Supervisors last month. It's scheduled as a $22 million project, but it has not yet been determined whether or not it's renovation, replacement. This is an ongoing discussion with town officials and between county officials and town officials on what really should happen with that. We do know some things to start with. First of all, there's a parking problem. We know that. We know that parking at the existing library is inadequate. Second, we know that the library is approaching its age when buildings like that need significant renovation. Generally 50 years is about as long as you ever want to go before you renovate something. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be replaced, but this is when you have to make the decision. The other thing that we know is that libraries are very different now than they were even 20 years ago in terms of how the public uses them. Technology is such a big part of library usage at this point, and the library here, unfortunately, was not built for that. So, you know, there are some very clear things that we know need to be done, and as supervisor, I would work with town officials and residents of the town to understand what's needed. And frankly, this is also a joint project with the town, so I'm reluctant to go too far in saying exactly what I want until those discussions would move forward. Thank you.
The Patrick Henry Library Project is a perfect example of a partnership between the county and the town. And we know that one of the problems the town has identified and wants to resolve is its parking problem. And we also know that one of the services that the county provides throughout the county is our public libraries. And so to work together so that the library that is county funded can also be co-located in a project that meets needs of the city itself, of the town itself, is the right thing to do. And so I am very pleased that the partnership has been established, that the wishes of the town are front and center in making this decision. And I similarly don't have a position on whether it should be a renovation or a replacement of the building, as long as it does meet the needs of the town, as are other public libraries that require upgrading need, because we do know that for many people, internet access means going to the public library, and job searches mean going to the public library. And so there are many roles that the library has to fill. I was a little disturbed to hear that the current town council sees our supervisor mainly during those library hours that occur once a month. And as important as those are, I see those primarily as opportunities for constituents to reach out to the supervisor. And I think that the town council and the county supervisor need to have far more interaction as a partnership than just a once-a-month meeting, which most of the time is devoted to constituent meetings. So in furthering the partnership between county and town, I would like to establish more regular communication between the two parties. Thanks.
The library is a vital part of the community here, and it has a high use. I mean, it's incredibly high use facility. And one of the things that Walter rightly pointed out is that we need to make sure that technology is there as we renovate or put in a new library, whatever we're trying to do. I also don't have a preference, but I will say that if we were going to do a renovation, it needs to be done the right way. When we're looking at environmental sustainability and building and construction practices, we need to look at what we are doing in terms of tear down and what that means and the type of product coming in. We know that it's quite expensive right now to put concrete in, and so that lends more expense to the facility, and perhaps doing a renovation with what's there is actually more cost effective and would bring you a better end product in the end. So that really needs to be assessed, and there needs to be a look at the practices, policies, and the environmental impacts also of how we're going to renovate and work on that library. So those are some of my concerns that I would bring to the table, but I honestly think that this is something that the community needs to make the decision on. Parking is an issue, and I know that there has been some concern about whether or not there should be a parking garage and how the access to that should be, and whether there should be a walking pathway across Maple, and all of these decisions need to be things that look at how the town actually wants things to be structured and how we want to make sure it's accessible to everybody and make sure that it is usable by everyone. But I would say that in terms of whether or not we fund renovation versus a new construction, it really needs to have that comprehensive look of environmental plus the needs of the community.
Thank you.